All right, we're going to get started. Thanks. This is the Freeport Project Review Board meeting for Wednesday, November 16th, 2022. The first item on our agenda tonight is an information exchange, and I'll turn it over to Caroline. Sorry, that was too fast.
You were too fast tonight. So we talked about this last month, but these are actually ground signs. So Good Fire, that was previously approved by the board on US Route 1 South. They're getting ready to open. They got approval for ground signs with the site plan, but they didn't have the details, so they came forward. Same previously approved locations. There's the one along Route 1, and then they have a second one, both on private property, showing where the new entrance is. You might remember, used to have access to this property off Route 1, and they changed it to Old South Freeport Road. I think I got that right. So that is what we had for staff approvals this month. The planning board continues to talk about cannabis and the changes to site plan review, pending the final draft from the town attorney, which I actually think came in today. They will be having a large public hearing at their December meeting about the cannabis and the changes to site plan. Downtown Vision Implementation Task Force took last month off. We talked about the workshop at the last meeting, so we won't talk about it again. The task force is scheduled to have a meeting tomorrow night. Those meetings are on Zoom. The information's on the town website if you want to join. Linda sometimes goes, Lynn sometimes goes, and sometimes Todd will go. So I'm sure one of the three of them will be there, and we'll report back next month. And then finally, I had emailed you guys, the board members, about a training opportunity. I heard from two of you that you're interested in going, so I'm waiting to get the sign-up information from MMA. But if anyone else hasn't been in the past and they want to go to the Maine Municipal Online Zoom training, that's coming up in December. If you want to go but you don't like Zoom or that date doesn't work, just let me know, because they offer them throughout the year, and they are bringing back some in person. Usually they're in like Saco or South Portland, so if you're interested and one comes up, I can let you know in the future. And that's all I have for you under Info Exchange.
Thank you. I do have a question on the next item, which is the review of the minutes from the October 19th meeting. Jim missed a portion of the meeting. Is he able to vote on the minutes for the meeting?
I think not.
Yeah, I would say you should probably
Okay, so we should table.
just recuse. So yeah, you should. Oh, do you have 4?
Nope.
No? Nope. Okay, table. I will put that on for next month.
All right, thanks. Okay, so item 3 on the agenda tonight are the reviews. The first item is American Eagle Signage Design Review Certificate. And when you're ready.
Sure. So American Eagle is located in the same building as The Gap at 35 Main Street. It's kind of on the corner of Main Street and Howard Place. They came in for a site plan approval for the addition quite a number of years ago and had some signage approved. They are now looking to modify their signage. Because some of the signage was new signage, we have no staff approval ability under design review, so they had to come back to the board. It took a little longer to get them to the board because it's a big building and there's a bunch of signage, and they had to go through and do all the calculations to show us that they also meet the standards of the sign ordinance. Pretty standard aluminum cutout letters, modern day gooseneck exterior lighting fixtures. They are taking some down and again adding some new ones. I'm not sure if Courtney is here representing the application. If not, the property owner is here.
Okay, thanks. Does the applicant have anything to add on this application? If so, please make your way.
It does not look like you have an applicant here, so you do need someone present to take action on the application. You could table it, and I could make a quick phone call if you'd like.
Okay. Is there a motion to table?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we have to take a roll call vote because we're in hybrid mode
or-
unless.
Could I ask a
Do
question?
you want to take it out of order instead
Let's
of
just,
tabling
yeah, we'll take it out of
I can
order.
run
Let's-
and take a
sure.
call. Linda
That's what
has
I was
a.
going to say. Could we
Yeah,
move it
okay.
Sure.
and then see what happens?
Let
at the end?
me just excuse for a second to see
Yep,
if we can
we'll pause.
call and get somebody on.
So did the place in Lincolnville you just bought recently?
We're on TV.
Oh, yeah.
Last summer? Yeah. I suppose everyone in town can watch. That's it.
Change the time.
Just going too fast, I guess. Does Caroline's computer tell you how many participants are online on Zoom?
2.
That's it. So I'm just curious how many members of the public.
Adam, Wes, and Eric. Yeah.
Okay. Well, this is-
Okay, so the mailbox was full, so you can, if you want to just take that out of order and go to the next item, we can take it back up and see if they
Okay.
show up later.
That sounds great.
Okay.
All right, moving on to the next review item. Freeport Village Apartments, multiple family dwelling, and this is a public hearing. I'll turn it over to Caroline, and then we'll have some discussion and Q&A from the board, and then we'll open the public hearing after that. Caroline?
Sure. So this is an application for multifamily housing on the property right next door at 22 Main Street. It used to be 2 parcels, there used to be 2 structures, and now it's sitting there as primarily a vacant lot. It needs site plan review, design review, and subdivision review. They have been through, or to the board a couple times, and there's been a site walk at the September meeting. The board granted conceptual subdivision approval, and at that point, what that means is that the board's determined that based upon the information submitted, that the process is complete for the applicant showing the conceptual layout is correct, meaning the building's in the right spot and any open space or undeveloped area is in the right spot. Tonight you have preliminary review, so it'd be preliminary subdivision review. This is when we do the public hearing. Because there's 3 different sets of standards involved here, although you could choose to take action on the preliminary plan, they would then go away, finish all their engineering, get all the rest of the paperwork complete, and potentially come back for final. You would still want to be giving them any feedback as far as any of the site plan components or the design review components, so that as they work on finalizing their plans, on working on the next submission, they can take any feedback and incorporate that. At the last meeting, one of the things the board asked for was some photo renderings to show how the proposed building would fit into Main Street. They did include that in the packet and the plan sheet for you. With regards to site plan review, they have to meet the requirements under the Village Commercial 1 for which multifamilies are permitted use, and then they need to meet any of the space and bulk letters in there. This would be connected to public utilities. They still do need to get their utility sign off. They have been working with the town engineer. He hasn't identified any major issues with how they're proposing to treat stormwater and do erosion control. There's actually two accesses to this property. There's one off of Main Street and one off of West Street. They are proposing still to eliminate the one on Main Street, have one-way access into the site from West Street. There's currently a memorandum of understanding between the abutting property owner and the town. If you park in our parking lot, you see there's a little kind of gravel connection. We had an agreement that they can exit over our lot. This applicant would like to formalize that. They have reached out to the town manager about going to the council to actually formalize that agreement in the form of an easement. If that's something they're going to pursue with the one-way access, we would want them to do that before they come back for final approval. Current entrance to Town Hall site is off of Main Street. Our exit is onto Depot Street. A lot of people have actually been asking me about this. The town of Freeport is actually not the owner of the parking lot that we'll probably mostly drive out tonight. That's actually owned by somebody else. So in this case, they're looking to get an easement from us over our property for the one-way egress from the site. They are proposing 33 parking spaces on site. You might be aware, because we've talked about it, but the planning board recently changed the parking requirement. So that would meet the parking requirement, whether they wanted to do shared parking or if they wanted to have it be non-shared parking. They have made some revisions to the facade of the building based upon the comments made at the last meeting. They changed the style of doors, and then they also eliminated that entrance on the West Street facade that was kind of in the center, but I'll let the applicant go through that. Again, this is preliminary review public hearing tonight, which you would need to make motions to open and close the public hearing. If you wanted to take action, you could do that on the preliminary plan tonight and put any conditions that they would need to satisfy with it, in addition to all the standard requirements of the ordinance before they come back. And the applicant's here tonight. Happy to answer any questions if I left anything out.
Thanks, Caroline. I'll turn it over to the applicants.
Hello. Is this on? No. Yeah. Hi, I'm Paul Peck. I am with LWS Development. I'm an attorney at Drummond & Drummond, been there for 32 years, been developing for about half of that. Live in North Yarmouth, lived there for 27 years with my wife, who I've been married to for 28 years. Pretty steady, boring, consistent, loyal guy. So in addition to, I've developed in Portland and Yarmouth and Cumberland and Scarborough and Carabasset and Rangeley. Also, one of the things I'm doing now is I'm working with the Western Main Mountain Workforce Housing Coalition to bring workforce housing to the Western Main Mountain region of Carabasset and Stratton, Kingfield. So that's really been really exciting for me. And I know I've told you some of this stuff, but every meeting seems like a sort of new introduction. This is our third meeting, so this is the third time you've heard some of this. Originally, I was really attracted to the site and to the town through the vision plan that you underwent the last couple of years. I followed it pretty closely and was very excited to see the needed changes in Freeport, given that the retail is not quite as big as it used to be, and that the town really wants to be more of a town for everyone and its residents, and have more resident activities, including housing. So that's how I got excited about the town, and then I found the site. Pretty great site. I was thinking about today what I would say, and the site is amazing, and the town's amazing, and it's so walkable. I mean, as you know, there's just everything here. There's trains, there's buses, there's performing arts centers and parks and historical society and community center and meeting house arts and library and banks and shops and restaurants and Boat Street Market. It's an incredible walkable town, and having housing in it just makes so much sense. And I know you know that, and I know the town expressed that through the vision plan. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to create housing. And as you also know, it's not easy. It's not easy given the impediments in our way, given the cost of construction, but that's what we want to do. We want to create housing. And the housing we want to create is two 15-unit buildings connected with a common courtyard, a garden-style apartment. One of the cool things about it is we have 7 ground floor units in each building. They're accessible. Some of them will be ADA, whatever the requirement is, but they'll all be accessible. And so it's a great place to age in place. There's a lot of, we're one of the oldest states. We have some of the oldest housing. The housing isn't necessarily safe and accessible. And to provide housing for 14 units of accessible, safe housing in the center of town is pretty cool. We're hoping that it's going to be a place for people that can age in place. The second and third floor will be 2 bedrooms, a little bigger units, and the first floors will be all 1 bedrooms, is what our plan is. We've been evolving, this plan's been evolving over this is our 3rd meeting, over this last 4 or 5 months. And we've went from a much larger footprint on the site to a much smaller footprint. We have a tremendous amount of green space between the buildings, on the sides of the buildings. We're creating a pocket park on the corner of West and Main that we think ties in really nice to the park across the street, and any further work that the town's going to do on that firehouse lot. And the vision plan has a big vision for that spot. So we think the pocket park would fit really nice. We're only covering on the Main Street frontage 51% with buildings and 42% on the West Street side. So we've reduced our scale. We have 3 stories. We're about 31 feet. About 31 feet. The zone is 45 feet, so we're substantially lower than the zone allows. And that accommodates our 3-story building. We've changed our architecture to very traditional colonial and federal style architecture, which we believe fits in well with the town and the historic nature of the town and the actual historic uses of Main Street. Main Street used to be large 3- and 4-story buildings. Some of them are here on this storyboard here. Yeah, I don't. They're here, yeah. So Main Street used to be populated by very significant buildings, 3 and 4 stories. So we think we fit really well with the historic nature when Main Street had housing. And now, we're looking to do housing on Main Street like it used to be. Where else do I got? The building that we're proposing in the way we're going to use the site, it meets the zoning, all the zoning requirements. We're not asking for anything that's not allowed in the zone. We've worked really hard to make it fit within the design guidelines of the village center. We've had conversations and some visioning with the principal group, which did your vision statement. We met with Russ, the principal there, and he helped us really come forward with our traditional colonial style art and federal style architecture. He really worked with us on our bay windows to really make them pop and be a focal point on the Main Street and West Street facades. So that was a really great exercise we had with them. And our architectural team at Caleb Johnson Studios, who's here today, who come right next after me. So that's basically all I have. Really excited about the project, really happy that we got through with conceptual, and we look forward to the preliminary approval today. And I'll give it to Patrick. Is Eric going next? I go next. Oh, sorry. Eric Duby of Trillium Engineers. Thank you.
Thank you. Eric Duby, Trillium Engineering Group, working on the civil, which is kind of the boring part of it, just the engineers. I got better artistic, smarter people that I have to at least go before. And we also have Tony Coles, landscape architect, that has helped with some of the landscape architecture for the project. So we're at that point where we've gotten kind of past the preliminary, and now we're moving, schematic, moving into preliminary, and then kind of moving to final. So we wanted to bring Tony in, kind of deal with those issues, and he's certainly here to answer any questions about some of the landscaping. So existing site plan that we have here, I think we've covered, Caroline did a great job covering a bunch of stuff, but we've got ledge outcrop on West Street. We've got some existing vegetation, some existing loose laid stone walls that are there. And then, of course, we have this this gully and ditch at the rear of the property that has some low-growth vegetation. And so that, and then, of course, the Page North, we have the existing town parking lot that I think a bunch of us parked in tonight. So, next slide. So, as Paul mentioned, we have the two buildings, and we've, they basically face Main Street. We're relocating some of that dry laid stone wall on Main Street to give us, and pushing it just a little bit further out to give us a little more room for a couple different seating and patio areas for the units that face Main Street. We have that center courtyard that we've talked about, and pathway, direct pathway to the sidewalk at Main Street. And then we have a little gathering space at the rear, and then we have a retaining wall because we do have a drop in grade at the rear of the site. And we have some stairs, and we also have handicap accessible ramp that we have to basically take care of the grading difference there. So, and with that, again, we've added some landscaping and some buffering around that. The ledge that is shown basically in this area, the corner of the building, we're not really removing any ledge. We might have to basically hammer out some ledge around the parking. But for the most part, the buildings are going to be slab on grade, not going to have basements. So we're really going to just have the foundations mold to the ledge as much as possible, leave that natural ledge along that West Street face, and then be able to work that landscaping around that edge. So just kind of talking about that. So the one-way entrance that we have, I know there's been some questions about that. We have a one-way entrance from West Street going into the property, and then so basically in this location, and then exiting out on that easement that we're talking about on town property. And we're doing a one-way because obviously we have some stacking issues along for the light on Main Street and West Street. We want to make sure that cars aren't exiting and then having some issues, turning in and out. So we felt that the biggest issue with this is going to be any cars that want to take a turn into the property coming from Main Street. What we're going to propose to do there, working with a traffic engineer, is to stripe an area of West Street. I think you've seen it along Pleasant Street. You have signage, appropriate signage, do not block the intersection, to be able to allow cars to be able to get in there. So we're working on that, and we'll have those details wrapped up with Public Works for final. So, but we feel that's the best laid plan, not to really, take that entrance or egress away from Main Street, be able to utilize this coming into the site, and then be able to have angled parking, and then kind of tuck that parking again in the rear of the building. So, for stormwater, we have roof drains, we have a couple of drains within the courtyard, catch basin drains, and all those drains tie into the system that's down in the lower parking area, and those are going to tie into an underground storage and treatment area for the site. Again, working with town engineer through that, but we have attenuation, we'll get treatment for that to deal with those issues. So we don't see any issues with that specifically. Dumpsters are up at the north of the site, up against that piece of ledge, and be able to have acceptable trash and recycling pickup at that location. And then with regards to utilities, we were previously trying to connect to West Street. We have gone through, talked with sewer and water, and it's not as feasible. Of course, the sewer line doesn't extend up as far as what we thought. So we're connecting out to Main Street. We feel that's going to be, it'll be a little intrusive with putting it in, but we feel that's the best thing. And again, sewer department is, we're in the process of working with them, but they feel that's the best connection also. I think that basically takes care of most of the engineering issues. Stormwater, I didn't elaborate on this, but I'll elaborate a little further because those questions came up last time. So just kind of dive back into that. So all the roof drains are going to tie into catch basin system and then tie into our underground stormwater system here. Most of the site flows here where we're picking up against a raised parking edge, and then we're picking all that stormwater up with catch basins at the bottom. So everything basically flows north to south on the sheet, and then again is picked up, gone to our underground treatment system, and then being able to tie back out into city system and releasing at a lower or a slower rate than what's there currently. So that takes care of stormwater. And I think that's it. So I'm available for any questions after that, and turn it over to Patrick, and he can really get into the meat and potatoes of the. We can talk about the landscape plan a little bit. Sure. Tony, you prepared? You want to do that? Yeah. Thank you.
Good evening, Tony Coles, landscape architect on the project. Just to give you a brief overview here, it's fairly simple and still evolving, I think, as Paul mentioned, but it's kind of an understated approach to the landscape, trying to get a rhythm of street trees along both West Street and Main Street, trying to get some mature canopy in there to create a presence. We realize this is a gateway here on the corner. I think it's important that we frame it that way. But as you notice, it is kind of a simple approach to plantings along the street and on all three sides, in fact. And then really it's just trying to get some more canopy in the back parking lot there by using that island there to add some trees and some shrubs. In places where we have some exposed foundation walls, we're doing some plantings to kind of climb up the wall and disguise a lot of that concrete if possible. And then there'll be some plantings which haven't been fully elaborated in this preliminary submission, but these garden units on the interior of the courtyard will have more plantings associated with them. But certainly out along West Street and along Main Street, it's a more of a simplified approach. There are some low shrubs in front of the wall, you'll notice along the west side there, along Main Street. Just a real simple articulation of plants, which I think would be very appropriate for this site. Happy to answer any questions if you have any as well. Thank you.
On the subject of landscaping, do you mind?
We'll
You
let
wanna
them
let them
finish.
finish? All right.
Yeah, and then we'll jump in. Yep.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Patrick Booth, architect with Caleb Johnson Studio. So just wanted to share with you some of the updates that we provided since the conceptual review board a couple months ago. One of the things that the board requested was a couple rendering simulations of the view of the building from further away for more contextual information down Main Street. And the ask was to pull it back far enough so you can start seeing some of the other buildings. So that's how we decided on these locations. And you can see how the far upper left corner is the approach coming northbound on Main Street, and the building is off to the right there. And I think that what we're looking to express here is that I know there's been some questions about the scale of the building and about its height. And so we think that in pulling out in context, we recognize that it does start to create that nice street wall, and it's not so jarring in effect against some of the adjacent 2-story, 1-story, and 3-story buildings nearby. That actually does start developing this nice gateway into the downtown district of Freeport. On the right side, upper right corner, is the opposite direction going southbound on Main Street, and you can see a lot of the existing trees do kind of help subdue and downplay the scale of the building as you're approaching that direction. And on the lower image is coming up on West Street, coming towards Main Street. All the trees are shown are representative of the landscape plan in general. Granted, they're probably a little more immature, but that's essentially what it would be looking like maybe 5 years from now, as the intention would be. Next slide, please. Yeah, so these are some new renderings that we've provided since the last meeting. We had pencil renderings before, the didn't show color. So this is to give a little more life and more clarity to the architecture of the building itself. We've also incorporated some of the landscape designs that Tony had helped us work with. You can see the focus of the still in progress pocket park there in the corner as you enter into the sites. For this, you'll see at the end of the presentation that we have looked at several color studies of the building itself. And although we do like all of them, the one that we gravitated the most for in a close kind of decision was that we just like the simplicity of the white and gray and black window scheme. There's a barn right across the street. I think it must be for the Public Works, but it has a very nice, clean, timeless character to it. And so that's something that we thought was a very appropriate element to include as a gateway towards the city. Some other elements that are new here, just showing other effects such as light fixtures at the front doors. So these doors right here are actually direct entries into units. And so it's all about activating the street and having it. And then there's also some, you can see someone enjoying, there's a cafe table. It's actually like their front porch. And because it's behind that stone wall, it becomes semi-private space. So it helps with activation and feeling the hominess of walking down Main Street as you're approaching the retail corridors. The next slide, please. And there's a couple of different more views showing the buildings, that green space down the middle, giving a nice break in the massing, light and air to come through there to help have the buildings feel more comfortable in the space itself. Let's see, anything else to pick up here? We've done some refinement on the trim work and the cornice since the last meeting. It's pretty minor to really kind of go into detail, but it's all meant a step towards refining the buildings in a way that are reminiscent of federal and colonial stylings of buildings. So one of the things that Caroline did mention is that we did, and you'll see it more clearly on the elevation, is that we did, the front doors were a little more ornate before, and it was a little less congruent with federal colonial stylings, essentially because federal and colonial aren't that ornate, and so we simplified the doors to be more two-panel as opposed to the four-panel we had before. Go to the next slide, please. So this is coming from West Street. You can see how we incorporate that ledge. We put some naturalized plantings in front of that, kind of really help let the beautiful landscape speak for itself. You can see the suggestion of that green wall. There is where we have the grade drops significantly from front to back. And so there's a portion of foundation wall that is visible on West Street, and so we're looking to screen that with some vegetation. You can see that being suggested right there next to the staircase of the lovely gentleman walking up with his suitcase. Next slide, please. Yeah, so here's some elevations. I believe these have notes on them. I can't recall if we had notes before, but those are just help to identify the material palettes, their proportions, and the elements of the windows, the details, all being reminiscent of historic stylings of detailing, so that it helps it all kind of come together in that sense. Let's see. Oh, and then this is also showing the West Street elevation. We had previously shown an entry on the West Street side before, but the thought was that it added too much kind of to that side of the building. And so we've subdued that because the primary entry for both these buildings would be through the courtyard, and so it was basically a redundant entry that we were just adding as an initial pass, and have since responded to feedback and eliminated that West Street entry. Let's see, next slide, please. And so this shows the back of the building, and this is where the idea of the vegetation wall being, excuse me, and kind of tucked down below the ledge is maybe where the electrical meter bank is. That's yet to be determined, but the idea would be that we locate it in a way that is, not very visible from public way. And this is the elevation facing Town Hall. The next slide, please. This is a new elevation that we didn't have shown before, but this is the elevation inside the courtyard, looking at either side of the building. So this is the main entry to these buildings for the people going up to the second and third floors, And you'll see some smaller balconies kind of helping break up the massing a bit too on this side for people on those floors. We felt it important to move the balconies away from Main Street because the balconies kind of break up that kind of types of facades that you would typically see. You wouldn't see balconies on these types of buildings, and so it was important to us to kind of shift any of that, although it's a nice amenity to have, pushing it off to the side away from Main Street itself. And there's also some little canopies around. These are also unit entry direction doors, and so there's some canopies over those to give a little more prominence to those unit entries as well. Next slide. This wasn't in your packet, but there was questions before about the floor plan, so I just want to show this. This is in progress, but just to help allude to what Paul was mentioning before, that this is the ground floor. This is the courtyard side, so this is the primary entry, and then there's an entry inside to 3 of the units, and then these are the direct entry units from Main Street itself, and then there's some units from the courtyard from this unit right here. So that's how you can have, that's how we have 7 units on this ground floor where the floors above have 4. And so if you go to the next slide, please. On the second and third floors are the same. It's they're all 2-bedroom units, very comfortable, all with great corner living room arrangements, so you can have great views of the surrounding area, and all with mostly with outdoor space as well to utilize. And next slide, please. This is just a diagram to help describe some of the benefits of the flat roof. Is that we're going to work on the detail of the parapets essentially, so the wall height will help screen any visibility of the mechanical units. There's going to be heat pumps. They're probably going to be around 30 inches tall, and they'll be on like a 2-foot stand to stay above the snow. So it's about 5 foot overall. And the thought process to if you put it in the middle of the building, you'll see how it screens from the majority view. Granted, if you get hundreds upon hundreds of feet away, you'll start seeing the top of it. But at that point, it's so far away, you don't pick up on it. It allows for the mechanical units to be on the roof and not be where you might often see them on the side of a building. That causes they're not very sightly when they're on the side of the building. So that's a benefit to having a flat roof. Next slide, please. And so yeah, this is another diagram that we had developed, just different color scheme options. The primary building material will be fiber cement panels of some different sizes. And they do come in manufactured colors, and so we looked at the colors that they had that would be reminiscent of historic colors that would be from like the Benjamin Moore or Sherwin-Williams catalogs. Our intent would be to get samples of both and make sure that what we are choosing is appropriate. But these are all kind of options that we have provided with Paul and talking it through about things that we think that could be successful for the town. I mean, I'm fine. I'm happy with all of them. And really just wanted to show that the efforts that we put in this to show what the building could look like on the street, and if there's any kind of discussions around that, we just wanted to open it up for further talking points. I believe that's the last slide, and there's nothing else that I have to share, and so happy to answer any questions, or Paul or Eric. Thank you.
All right, thanks. As we've done on prior applications with multiple layers of reviews, we'll go through each one at a time, starting with site plan. So if the board has any questions or comments with regard to the site plan, we'll start there and proceed. Yeah, Jim?
Chairman, could I ask if there's any wisdom in maybe taking this out of order and allowing the public hearing aspect first, so we can maybe do one round of questions and not circle back on issues that come up in the public hearing?
Well, I kind of want to keep it the way we typically do it. I think what we'll do as part of the public hearing is to make sure there's no back and forth between the applicant and the public. We'll just make sure the applicant keeps track of all the questions the public has and then answers them at the end, because hopefully the questions we're asking and the presentation that they've made have answered a lot of the questions that they may have.
So that said, I think I can ask better informed questions after kind of hearing the full scope of input.
How does the board feel?
Can we not have our own second round after?
We can have second round, exactly. Yeah, we can take as much time as we'd like as a board to ask questions. So we can ask additional follow-up at the end.
To your discretion,
Thanks.
Chairman.
All right. We'll start with site plan. Any questions or comments from the board?
Does site plan include a question about the landscape plan?
Sure.
Just want to make sure.
Yeah.
The question I have has to do with in the internal courtyard. Based on the direction, sun direction and everything, is that area going to get appropriate light for the plantings that you've indicated? It seems like there might be shading and all from the building.
Yeah, very perceptive, thank you. Yes, I would agree. It is a fairly shady courtyard at certain times of the year, and the plants that have been selected for that area will respond accordingly to the amount of light there. So there are things like viburnum out there, there's some amelanchier, mostly native plantings, there's some hydrangea, things that are going to do well in limited amount of sunlight. There will be sunlight, I believe, especially on that sort of eastern end there, I think in that little small courtyard area or outdoor civic space, it will get a little bit more light. But yes, I am well aware of the fact that it is a little bit of a tunnel in there and that the height of the buildings will restrict some sunlight. So yes, I will be choosing some appropriate plants that will withstand that amount of sunlight or lack of sunlight. Thank you.
I have another question on the number of apartments on each level. I think, if I wrote this down properly, so 7 ground floor units in each building, and then the other units, I think whoever made that comment said they would be on the second floor. Does that mean they're duplexes, or is there equal second and third floor?
There's 7 on the first floor, 4 on the second floor, 4 on the third floor.
Okay,
So
They're-
the
each one
15
is a single story of itself?
Correct, yeah.
Okay. And then the other related comment, the ground floor apartments, you said they're accessible. Does that mean accessible, are you defining accessible as entry from the street by walk-in or wheel-in, as opposed to accessible, meaning the internal design and appliances are also accessible appliances? You know, there's a height thing that you deal with. Is that part of accessibility?
Yeah, so it's any building with more than 4 units needs to meet Fair Housing Act, which means it's accessible, but it's not the accessible where you have grab bars and a turning radius. It's not full accessible. So it's allows for you know, any unit could have wheelchair access. All the doors are at least 2'10", so that if anyone were renting the unit and became temporarily handicapped or were in crutches, for example, they can still use their apartment fairly without being discriminated against, essentially. So that's how it is. And then I believe at this number of units, one unit of the 30 would need to be a type A, which is the fully accessible unit, which is just yet to be determined, but it would be one of them on the ground floor.
Can you go to the graphic that you prepared, the street view?
Sure. Which one?
The upper left. Well, the upper left. I have been struggling to figure out whether that's accurate or not. It seems so low to me. Did you, and I know that I appreciate you accommodating me by doing this, and I know transposing something on a perspective view is not easy. Was that done with some sort of engineering certainty or just best guess?
I mean, it is a bit of an artistry best guess situation, but we have the other buildings modeled in our computer software, so we can kind of line up the model before we. So this is a photo montage that we clip from a rendering onto an actual photo, and so we have this building modeled correctly in this one. So essentially, we could get this height right based on how big these other buildings are, and so there is some level of accuracy that we can, as much as we can in this. But I think it's fair to say that if this roof line is the peak of a gable, which is a 2-story building with the gable is 32 feet high, and this is your perspective line, that it makes sense that this in the foreground is still taller than that building in the background, I guess, is what we're,
I was trying to line it up with, and I don't mean to split hairs here, I was trying to line it up with the utility pole, which is right just 5 feet in front of your building, and it just is such a difference between the top of that utility pole on the top of your building. I just was wondering how you arrived at it. What's, the height of the building is 31, you said?
It's 31 or 32. We haven't defined the parapet height. I think that'll depend on how well we screen the mechanical units.
And how, is that, I know the street, I think your datum at the street is 162?
Yeah, I believe so, the above
So is the
floor elevation.
31 added onto that, or is there a foundation and grading
The
change?
building, the height of the site is taller on this side than the back side, and so this building in the foreground is set at a lower height of finished floor elevation than the other one to help.
So what would finished floor be at Main Street?
I don't know exactly precise. It would, we might have to say.
They're a foot different.
Okay, so it's about the same.
Yeah,
Okay,
so
thanks.
if the one further up northbound is at 162, then the other one's at 161, because then it still rises up to it, so there's no drainage issues.
Now that you, and I'm mindful that professional fees are, you always want to minimize them. Now that you have this loaded, would it be possible for the next meeting or some other time, to do the upper left photo and show the whole building by my count, counting windows, I think a third of the building is on there on the right side, and I think that's in view when you come down Main Street.
Yeah, we would have to redo it, but yeah, we could do that. It doesn't take us very long. It's the other one where it's computer rendering, we can spin it around because it's all computer generated, but this
Yeah.
one, because it's like a static image, we were just trying to pull it back far enough, but not be so far away that it seemed like we were misleading anyone. So
I know.
we got as close as we could to show the building in context, same as this one. And then just the photo that we took was that ratio. We didn't have like a wide angle
Yeah.
camera when we took that photo.
When we get around to making comments, one of my comments is going to be the size of the building, and the place where it's most apparent is on this approach, the upper left approach, and so to have the whole building on there might be helpful as the discussion goes on.
Can I add a data point to the request for this next illustration, is to incorporate to the best you can, a measurement taken from the top of that street light and the top of that utility pole. That I think would help give us confidence that this is, to scale.
That would be helpful. I mean, I came down in daylight today because it was not correlating with what I was expecting to see. I came down in the rain with a tape measure, got halfway up the pole. I think the pole's 38 feet, so there'd only be 7 feet difference. But
There's probably a grade change there, too.
you're dealing with rank amateurs here, but
There will always be a level of like fudging in these images because we can only be so accurate. Oftentimes, if it is this kind of scrutinized level, there's like a balloon test. You would just have a balloon that's 32 feet tall at the corner of the building, and then you can walk around and see the height of that anywhere you might want, and then you can kind of understand how you can then extrapolate the building from those points. So that's an option that I've seen a lot of towns do. And I don't know.
balloon test is a lot better idea than a metal tape measure in the rain on a utility pole. I think the utility pole is at the building. It's just across the sidewalk from the middle of your building. So I just think, Jim,
to be fair, the building is set back like from that corner a good 20, 30 feet. So I don't know where the pole is exactly, but there's perspective that happens there too.
if you could just double check it when you have it.
Yeah, I just don't know how to,
Is what you want to stand by.
I don't know how to get my laser measure to hit something. That's all I'm thinking in my head right now. But I'll
Thank
take a
you.
look at it.
Any other?
On landscaping, question about where we stand with that West Street view. I think it was previously represented us that the plan was that that 48-inch oak was going to stay. So help us understand some of the problems that you've encountered with what was originally folded in as the plan?
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand the nature of the question. Okay, gotcha. Yeah, you can go into-
We looked specifically at this issue and gave it a lot of attention within our group, and went back and forth, talked with some earthwork contractors about the viability of, okay, we can come in here and say, show on the plan that, yeah, we're going to keep the tree. But the reality is that with the ledge adjacent to where that is, with the drip edge of the tree, and all that going on, there is a very low probability that that tree is going to survive during and after construction. So at that point, we made the decision to basically not come in here with the false idea of trying to keep the tree, go through that, and we said we're going to add the landscaping, work with Tony, and work with the owner, and then try to provide some landscaping, some good tree growth, solid tree screening along that edge that is going to fill in within the next 5 to 10 years.
And I'm sorry, maybe I didn't quite hear this. What was the expert that made that assessment about the likelihood of survival of the tree under those circumstances?
When you say the expert, you talk, I mean, I guess.
I mean, was that decision made, was that recommendation or perspective given by an engineer, by a forester, by, who is the professional that kind of made that assessment?
We have earthwork guys that we're working with, getting bids and trying to work with those, and so that was a comment that they've made. We've also, in my experience, going through a lot of site development and working with that. So as the engineer of record, I've made that decision that there's, with shallow roots that we have over the ledge and the drip edge of where we are within that building. And I'll let Tony comment about it because he has a lot more experience about that, but that's how we made that decision.
Right. So contractors and engineers made that decision?
Yeah, I'd just like to add to that if I could. Generally, I think you'd like to save a tree any chance you get. It's a gorgeous tree, there's no doubt about it, but I can tell you anecdotally from several projects that any work that happens within that drip line of that tree, especially in oak, they're very sensitive to that, and they're uniquely sensitive in that they don't often show it while construction is going on. You're going to need lay down area, there's going to be interruptions in the root growth there, there's all sorts of disruptions that'll happen there. And I've seen almost, to the T, 18 months after the project is done, there's a sharp decline in the tree and it generally doesn't make it. So oaks in particular are super sensitive to that. Now, I'm not an arborist, but that's just anecdotal information that I've seen on several projects. So I think it's a fair assessment to say that that tree likely would not make it, and I think you go to great measures to keep it and then find out that it would probably go into a steep decline pretty quickly after that. But certainly if you wanted an arborist's opinion, you could get that as well.
The other question I had, I think, at least prior to the public comment, is relating to the easement, the abutters easement. Is that in progress? Is that wrapped up?
Parking, or is that what you're saying?
This is essentially over the parking lot that would be the exit, the point of exit.
Yes, I'm working with the town manager on the easement. We've submitted a draft. He's just replied through Caroline with some changes to the draft before he sent it to his attorneys. The indication is that it's something that the council would have to vote on, but they think they'd be very favorable towards granting that easement, provided we get the language right for them. And we're going to make one more change or a couple changes to the draft easement. Then the town manager will send it to town council, and then it'll come back, and we think I'll look at it, and our team will look at it, and then it'll go to council for a vote.
So I'm asking about the neighboring lot that's privately owned, that also will require.
There's no easement there. We're not using that lot. The one behind?
One behind.
Yeah, we're not accessing that. We're going out through Town Hall's exit down to Depot Street.
Gotcha, okay. All right, understood.
I have a related question on the easement question. And I'm not saying it's not going to get approved and it won't go through, but if it did not, do you have any alternatives in mind that would be available to you to continue this project if there is no easement?
I think the alternative would be to exit and enter through West Street.
Okay, and if that was also acceptable, so that would be your alternative, right?
Sure, yes, the town engineer would have to weigh in on that, and we'd either get it or we wouldn't.
Okay. And then I have an additional question on the drawings that show the parking. There's parking that goes diagonal along that outside lot that's not part of your system, and then the parking that's in more internal to that. And it seems pretty tight to me. It seems like you probably, if I'm looking at the scale, and I don't know, I mean, granted, I don't know much about the distances and driving and backing up, but it seems pretty tight for the backing up out of those horizontal, the parking spaces that are a bit on the diagonal and going towards the other ones. Is that normal distances that you have here?
Yeah, we're meeting town standards, to answer your question.
Okay, because it
Yes.
looks like it's like about a 20, maybe 20 feet distance, if that?
No, it's, I believe it's whatever the ordinance is, 24, forgive me, different towns. have
Okay,
different
I'm
ones.
just kind of guessing from your scale and the location.
No, when you look at when you look at it maybe on this blow-up scale here, you can clearly see that, for an 18 feet, you've got that and a lot more for that. Now, we don't, against the one-way, we're actually having an 18-foot access way, but in the town, the parking themselves, 24-foot aisle. There it is, right there. Thank you. Appreciate that. So we've got our 9 by 18.5, and then we have our 24-foot aisle, which meets the ordinance.
Okay. And then the area that the dumpsters are sitting in, is that enough distance and spacing for large garbage trucks to come in and do their business of lifting and all? It seems like also it's pretty close to those straight in parking spaces that are kind of opposite the garbage location?
Yeah, it's a little tight over there, but they can make that radius. They're gonna have to come in, back in, and be able to pull forward.
Okay. Have to back in from West Street to get up to the garbage?
No, I'm sorry. Pull in, back in here, and then be able to pull forward.
Okay.
So, within the site circulation itself.
I wouldn't want to park on the ends, that's just my opinion.
It's usually done early in the morning, too. So, as we probably, as anybody know, when you hear the garbage truck banging around.
Ours are at noon. Listen. Okay, I think, okay.
Any other questions or comments from those in the room on site plan? Lynn?
You need to unmute.
I'm all set, thank you.
Okay, thanks. We'll move on to subdivision. Are there any questions or comments from the board with regard to subdivision? Lynn?
All set.
All right, thanks. And then design review, are there any questions or comments from the board with regard to design review?
I've got questions about design review.
Yeah, let's do it.
They're comments, not questions. I think the building is too large. I don't know if you want me to go through this in detail at this point, through the ordinance?
Please, yeah.
The design review ordinance is really very location-specific in Freeport. Just a building that goes in one part of town doesn't automatically fit in another part of town under the design review ordinance. I don't have any questions about the site plan or the subdivision ordinance. I do view this as the gateway, the entrance to town, and it's next to this building that we're in, which is historic in nature, and the next building is the beginning of the historic district, which is registered in the National Registry of Historic Places, and so that has to be weighed in when we're looking at putting a building on this location. And so that's the backdrop by which I look at the design review ordinance. And I'll just give you the sections that I find troubling. I can't read our design review ordinance and see this building fitting in this location. And when absent this building, this is a significant improvement in scale and design, in my opinion, from the first one we looked at with you folks. But when I read our design review ordinance and picture in my mind's eye what should go on that location, and what's envisioned under the design review ordinance, it's nothing like this scale. So I'll give you the sections that I find of concern. Section 1B3, which is the introduction to the design review ordinance review standards. Under specific intent, subsection 3 says it's to assure that new buildings are designed and built in a manner compatible with the character of the district in terms of scale and effect. And I'm mindful that we've got buildings that were on Main Street and in this part of town previously that were large buildings, but the design review ordinance, I'm afraid, only looks at buildings that are nearby now. Under the specific design guidelines, number 1 is the scale of the building. And I'll read that. The exact wording for this, again, this is the 10 things we need to review under design review. The first one, scale of building. The scale of the building depends on its overall size, the mass of it in relationship to the open space around it, the sizes of doors, windows, porch, and balconies. The scale gives a building presence. That is, it makes it seem big or small, awkward or graceful, overpowering or unimportant. The scale of the building shall be visually compatible with its site and with its neighborhood. The second design review guideline is height. A sudden dramatic change in building height can have a jarring effect on the streetscape, i.e. the way the whole block looks. A tall building can shade its neighbors or the street. The height of the building should be visually compatible with the heights of the buildings in the neighborhood. And I do understand the building across the street is probably about the same height as this, but it has a peaked roof, and this building really fronts on West Street and Main Street, and that height extends for something like 150 feet instead of just being a peak roof. So I think that I'd have concern under the height. The third design review guideline is the proportion of the front facade. The proportion of a building's front facade, and again, I feel like this almost has two facades because West Street is really more visible than even Main Street to the practical eye. Proportion of building's front facade. The first impression a building gives is that its front facade, the side of the building which faces the most frequently used public way. The relationship of the width to the height of the building of the front facade should be visually compatible with its neighbors. And the sixth one is roof shapes. Again, I note I don't think there are any other flat top buildings in this area. roof shapes. A roof can have a dramatic impact on the appearance of a building. The shape and proportion of the roof should be visually compatible with the architectural style of the building and those of the neighboring buildings. So that, I'm mindful that we want to have projects like this in town, and that we need them, and that it's of keen interest to our economic future. But within the confines of the design review guideline, those are the concerns I have.
So we prepared in the conceptual review more descriptive illustrations reflective of the design standards. If I have Wi-Fi, I can pull up the old presentation. It might be more helpful to respond to some of these questions. But yeah, granted, it's the scale question is something we've all been interested in the whole time, and I think the thing to just remember is that we are, and I know it's not in ordinance, but we are looking at a vision plan that was developed by a lot of people in the town itself about the scale of buildings that they are comfortable with and what would be appropriate, especially for the need for housing in town. This isn't a 4-story building. This is a 3-story building. At worst, it's 1 story taller than its neighbors. I guess when I think jarring effect, a 1-story change in building height doesn't have a jarring effect on me necessarily. The only reason why it has a jarring effect right now is because there's kind of little context of street wall in the immediate area. I mean, if you were to take the same building, move it a block inward, then it fades away a bit. And I think that's something that shouldn't be discounted in the sense that this building is designed the way it is because it's showing like a bit of more of a future progress of continuing the nice street wall effect and things that happened a little further north down on the street. Sensitive to the fact that it's 3 stories and not 2 stories. Sensitive to the fact that it's a flat roof, not a gable roof. That's deliberate in the sense that if this building doesn't work economically at 2 stories. So I guess that's the first hard thing to understand is that this building has to be 3 stories or else it can't get built because the economics just don't work with the amount of construction costs and housings that can be produced with that. So 3 stories is what we are pressed with to look at here. Breaking the building in 2, adding green space. Flat roof means that the height is 32 feet and not peaked roof with a 40-foot roof, for example. So all these elements we think bring the scale down, and it is within what is the melding between the vision plan of the town and what is historically comfortable for towns of this size in Maine and New England and so forth, that we are proposing something that is fitting in terms of scale in that regard. We will continue to do what we can to, present different angles or demonstrate on West Street what kind of other improvements could be done if the emphasis is that it's also a primary facade as well. Happy to do that as well. It's part of the reason why we had the West Street entry there before. But I'm just not sure how, other than to say the building is 2 stories, because it couldn't work like that. But even not saying that, I do believe that the scale of this building is very comparable in respect to the vision plan and what could be done for the future of the town in that area. And yeah, it's setting a bit of a precedent there, but we think it's a positive precedent as a gateway to the city.
Did you guys want to see the other drawings? I know they're having Wi-Fi issues in here. Do you want to see this on screen?
Can't hear, Carolyn.
Oh, I'm asking them if they want to see the past submission on screen. Do you need this?
No? We saw it
Okay.
live, we've seen it.
Okay.
Design review
Yeah,
isn't up for vote today, correct?
Correct.
It's not, but I think in fairness to the applicant, with these 3 layers, you want to give them as much feedback as you can.
So in the previous, we did diagrams that showed the scale of the buildings around in context and showed the footprints of buildings, and essentially it showed how the footprint of the building is very similar in size to a lot of the buildings around, and heights vary, because it's hard to define what is a 2-story, 2.5-story building with a gable roof, but it's all within like a realm of heights that we tried to illustrate on a diagram form to help kind of address the earnest work we tried to help address that specific question, design standards. You had other questions, you had other items like the, you had mentioned 150 feet for West Street. It's actually 98 feet. Just make sure that, for the record, that it
I
wasn't.
think if you, I was just guessing at the elevation on Main Street plus West Street, that height goes all the way around.
Oh, well, the portion of the building facing Main Street, each building is only 48 feet, and 48 feet, and then the long side is 98. I just wanted to clarify that, because I would agree that 150 feet of unrelenting wall would not be appropriate. The flat roof question, it's the ordinance does say that it's compatible with the architecture of the building. I would say that the architecture of the building of this type with federal colonial style, when it's 3 stories, a flat roof is the appropriate architectural compatibility roof style of a building of this type. If you were to put a gable roof on this, it would be peculiar. It would be peculiar to add gables on the fronts of the building, like at the bay windows, to add gable roofed elements in front of the bay windows. It's not something that is congruent with what I've seen in federal and colonial style buildings. It's more of a what happens, more of a neoclassical modern way of people trying to apply some single-family home residential stylings on commercial buildings, essentially, that makes it less successful. I think this is certainly more reminiscent of a building that's obviously brand new, but is representative of buildings built of this era when it was appropriate to build flat roofs and of that height. Is there something else that you had mentioned that I missed? Board?
I wish we could waive the requirements of the design review guidelines.
Yeah, I just think that it's subjective to a degree, of course. So there's a lot of room for opinions, and I know I'm just one person in this, and we put together a package that we believe is very strong in defending our views of the ordinance itself, and we'd be happy to. In our previous submission, we did have more commentary to each one of those 9 guidelines. But as a follow-up, we can address every single one and diagram our building, because we seriously did think about every single one of those as we designed this building. And we can put that on record of why we chose the way we did something. But if someone just doesn't like a 3-story building, there's nothing I can argue about that. It's just that we believe that a 3-story building is appropriate. We broke the building. We recognized the comments from before. We understood, and we believed. We earnestly took it back and really redesigned the building that we felt was working with both the ordinance and the feelings of the board and the townspeople.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the board with regard to design review?
Taking them online from Lynn too.
Or Lynn online if she's ready?
Thank you, I'm fine.
She's fine?
Yeah.
Okay,
I
thanks.
think-
Thanks, yeah, Jim?
I think I'd only add, the observation that I think certainly, where Ford's coming from on a lot of these points. But my view, looking at some of those same things, I disagree. I think that I see a lot of here what's consistent with what's in design review. If the notion that design review is based on what's existing there, what exists here is an empty lot, and it would have to be an empty lot forever. And so it is subjective, it is all relative. I think, I share the concern that we're maybe right on the edge of what's appropriate, but I think it's certainly not out of hand excessive. I do, that said, that comment is based on the fact that I very much so want to see some of the elevations that we looked at today with a little bit more assurance that we're looking at something that's been scaled. Because what I see in those photos, I think gives me comfort that this is a reasonable size. But again, I'd like to see that to feel more comfortable that we're looking at an authentic representation.
comments, Lynn?
I'm okay.
Yes. All I'd like to say is that the one difference as I recall, from what the principal group gave us in terms of look for our smaller village and what's here is primarily related to that roof. Most, as I recall, almost, if not all of the renderings were traditional peaked roof buildings. And so this, to my way of thinking, is a departure from that. I understand the economics and that they need to squeeze in 3 floors of living space, but I think that's where this falls short of what I thought the vision for downtown Freeport was.
I would just say that, the vision process was a very long process. We got a lot of different diagrams for our community to react to, but just to remind you that you guys have to look at the standards you have before you today.
Thanks. I just have a few comments. I think I agree with Jim. I think when we look at design review, there's obviously a lot we're supposed to consider, but to me, the scale does not give me pause based on those renderings. I think if we've got additional information, like Ford's requested, I think that's just going to help. Ford raised concerns about proximity to the historic district and how it may detract from that area. But I feel like the building that our earlier applicant is in with corrugated steel siding it detracts more from that historic district than something like this would. Across the street, we have a public safety building with an extremely tall hose tower. It's designed postmodern. It's not reflective of sort of what we would look at typically in design review. So that is, I think, more jarring than this building would be. And then the building that's catty corner that you see in the upper left photo is actually quite high on the street because of the way the ground is raised at that location. So, I mean, I really think the applicant's done a good job with regard to design review to develop something that is appropriate for this location and in Freeport. If there are no other questions or comments from the board, I will open it up to the public hearing if there is a motion to do so.
So moved.
All right, thank you, Linda. Second. Okay, we have to do a roll call vote because we are in hybrid mode. Berger.
Yes.
Blanchard, yes. Montleone.
Yes.
Reiki.
Yes.
Hamlin.
Yes.
Okay, the public meeting is open. If you'd like to speak, please go to the podium, state your name, address, and if you have any questions for the applicant, I'd like the applicant to keep track of all of those questions and then answer them at the end. That way there's no back and forth. If you could all limit your comments to about 2 minutes, that would be extremely helpful. We do have a full room, and I know that there are folks online. Thanks.
You did have public comment. You got some via email that came yesterday. There were copies over there, and then you got additional comments today.
We can start online if nobody is jumping up. Do we have, how many folks do we have online?
You have 3 members of the public online. You don't have any hands raised yet.
Yes.
Okay, then we'll start with the room. Go ahead.
They need to go to the podium.
Yes, please go to the podium.
And then you do have a hand up online now.
Okay, great.
Hi, Kathleen Sullivan.
Cutting a lot?
No, Mark, you go ahead. I live Moose Crossing, and we've lived here 45 years. So I've been looking at this lot for a long time. And actually, I'm really excited by the idea of us having housing right there on the corner so that when people come into town, they have the sense that we have housing downtown, as opposed to just stores downtown. So I really am excited about having housing. And I kind of like the look of the building, even though it's big like that, because it does reference other buildings uptown that are 3 stories high. And I think a lot of buildings traditionally have 3 stories in downtown, all, Lewiston and, Ellsworth, they all have this sort of 3 stories with a flat roof, and it is reminiscent for me of what that design looks like. So, but what I want to talk about, just for 1 second, is what we're losing by putting the housing there. Because I sat there all summer for the farmer's market, and it was just an amazing experience to be able to have people come and gather in space. So we will get housing, but we will lose that space for a public gathering space that people can come to and they see it. All kinds of people stopped by from all over the country as they were driving by. And I don't know that we have a space like that in town. If we use the Memorial Park, I don't know if anybody's going to go near that park because it's just hidden. It's hard to see anything that happens there. So I just want to give a pitch for the design, for continuing the conversation about having a place to gather, like for the market or for an outdoor concert or for, because where are these people going to go besides to a shop? Besides shopping, where are they going to go? So that's what my pitch is for, thinking about that. Thank you. Now it's your turn.
Okay, thanks, Deb. I'm Mark Seeger, South Freeport Road. 2 thank yous and 2 comments. The thank yous are one to the owner for making the space available for Farmers Market, which I agree was a wonderful activity. And as an aside, in the downtown vision, there's talk about the idea of a new town square behind this commercial area, and encourages incentivizing developers to come up with ideas and to coordinate closely with the town in terms of figuring out what public space would, how that would develop behind there, which raises for me the question about if you have a lot of traffic coming through, will that interfere with the idea of a viable town square gathering space in the town-owned land below. And the second thank you is to the developers for addressing the housing idea, which is talked about a lot in the plan. I agree that it's a wonderful idea. My comments are 2, and very briefly, as a layperson, this plan feels squeezed. It feels like too big a thing in too small a space. It's just a personal reaction. What's referred to as a courtyard feels to me more like an alley, just as not as a vibrant space. And the parking, I agree with the comment that it looks like bumper cars waiting to happen. The parking spaces come right up against the entry to the drive. There doesn't seem to be any space for error. So there are a lot of ideas that I like about it. It feels a little too much on a little too little. So those are my 2 comments.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm John Patterson. I live on Flying Point Road. Been here for 42 years. I want to agree with the comments of the gentleman before me and with Mr. Reike. I think this is a whole heck of a lot better than what was proposed the first time. I recognize that they have a legal right to do what they're doing. I applaud them for not proposing 45 feet, even though I would suggest somebody ought to take a look at that particular provision in the ordinance. That seems way out of scale. I'm not a design professional. I stood at the corner and walked around the corner the other day, and it just feels overpowering. It just feels too big to me. I'm not surprised that economics is in large measure driving this design decision, and I don't know what to do about that. I can't address that. I don't know what the numbers are. But all I can tell you is from my unexpert eye, it just feels too massive. If you stand out here in the front door of the town hall and think of those 2 things next door, it just seems overpowering to me. Across the street, China Rose, I think is probably 30-ish feet, but it doesn't feel 30 feet. The one next door to it, the 2 next door to it, as you go towards Holbrook Street, they're probably in the same height category, but they don't feel as bulky as this did. It just feels too massive to me. And for that reason, I would conclude that they're not compatible. Just my 2 cents. Thanks.
Any, yep, okay, go ahead.
Hi, my name's Thomas Henninger. I am a commercial fisherman. My partner Ken Sparta and I opened the Freeport Oyster Bar. And we are wholeheartedly in favor of this sort of thing exactly. We learned as best we could about what our business might look like before we started and who might be coming into our place. And we had one tremendous surprise, which was that a lot of our regulars, people who've actually meant a lot to us in terms of business and people who've become our friends too, walk to our place. And we were actually surprised by that. We've become friends with other people in town that have small businesses like the cafes and such. And we like small businesses, and we like family-owned businesses, and we like a town that has small businesses in it. And if we're going to have such things, I feel like we need people living in town. The aging in place thing we think is brilliant. The idea that there would be the sort of housing that maybe somebody who worked for us might live in, or a teacher from the school might live in, and be able to walk and take advantage of things like cafes in our place, we think would be lovely. And I couldn't help but notice, are you able to show us the picture of the building? It reminded me of something, and it was the 3-story original L.L. Bean building, which is somewhat iconic in our, this town. So, good luck, you guys.
Doesn't bend. Suzanne Watson, 21 Carriage Road. Been in town for about 17 years. Been a commercial real estate developer for the better part of 30 years in my earlier life. And I'm really, really, really conflicted about my feelings about this development, because I very much want housing in this town. If I had my vision of the great vision this town could be and will be, I'm convinced it's going to be back to sort of walkability. It's going to be back to citizens who can walk out of a building and take part in an oyster business or a coffee shop or whatever. That's really a vision I have. But there are things that we give up in the idea that we'll look back on this piece of property 10 years hence and say, what did we lose? Because we've got apartment building. I'm certain we're going to have a lot of residential building. It's already beginning to happen in town. It's going to happen. I just feel like this one particular piece of property is immeasurably valuable and cannot be replaced in terms of green space, in terms of a gathering space, a meeting space, that breathing space. And it is our gateway. I find it really interesting that we are taking so much time to make this more park-like when we already have the park. And the other thought I had was, if I could bring in, if I'd thought of this sooner, bring in a rendition of what this would look like if we really developed it as a green space adjacent to our town hall, adjacent to the historic district, and say, wouldn't that be, look again, 10 years hence, wouldn't it be an amazing thing to have said, we saved that? Thank you.
Hello, I'm Gordon Hamlin. Been a resident of Freeport for 48 years. I live at 14 Chapel Street, which is just north of the Harris Deacon Inn. I've been following the approval process for Freeport Village Apartments since July. This location is very important because it represents the southern gateway to downtown Freeport Village. The architectural look and feel of new construction in this location is very important to downtown. I am concerned that the scale and design of these buildings is not consistent with the look of a traditional New England town that represents the center of Freeport Village today. Many homes in this area have been converted to commercial buildings, but still maintain a charm of a New England village. A classic example of this commitment is the McDonald's at the northern gateway to downtown Freeport Village. In that case, the restaurant was located in an existing building to preserve the classic feel and look of Freeport. This project, as proposed, does not. I ask the board to table this proposal. Thank you.
I'm too little for this mic. My name is Judith Burwell. I've lived here. I can't say that I'm native to Freeport because my parents moved here when I was 3, but I've lived here all my life. Went to school here. Graduated proudly from Freeport High School as a Falcon. And went on to University of Maine. Or no. In any case, the reason I wanted to speak tonight is that I think it's a great idea to bring housing into downtown Freeport. I'm an elder. There's a lot of elders in Freeport. We are wanting, not just the elders, but we are wanting a lifestyle where we're going to be able to go shopping and for food and all the needs that people have and be able to walk to do that. And that's one of the reasons why so many towns like Brunswick are being sought after, because they have that. The only problem, I think, with this is that it's the wrong building for the site. And I agree completely with all the negative comments that people have said. It doesn't fit. I so appreciate the work that all the people who've made plans, all the professionals who've contributed tonight. I can see that there's been a tremendous amount of work that's gone into trying to make this fit into Freeport, but it doesn't. So I ask you also to table this. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Brett Richardson, Executive Director of the Freeport Economic Development Corporation. I've only been here about 8 months, so I bring a little bit different perspective than many of the folks who've been here for a long time. And I don't speak on behalf of myself, but I speak on behalf of our board, who spent a lot of time thinking about this and supporting the downtown vision. And what we hear from businesses, to echo the Oyster Bar, is that workforce is a huge issue, and there's not a lot of housing in the area for folks who our businesses need to work. Foot traffic continues to be an issue. We're coming out of COVID. We're doing better, but we need foot traffic. A lot of resources, a lot of energy, a lot of talent was invested in developing the downtown vision. And to our board's eye, this project is exactly what the downtown vision is asking for. A lot of work's gone into it. The development team has put a year or so into this, a lot of resources, and has been very responsive to the feedback. That's all we can ask for. And if you look at those storyboards, it might not be exactly in the same part of town, but this speaks to what classic New England villages looks like, and we need this development. So ask you to support it on behalf of FEDC.
Everyone, my name is John Boland. I'm also a relative newbie. We actually live right across the street from this. We own the Nicholson Inn, right there on 25 Main Street. And it's interesting because I agree with almost everybody and every comment that's been made here, right? You know, and I've been following the Vision project since we moved here about 2 years ago. Love the idea of housing, love the idea of attracting more people, love the idea of new businesses and what Tom and Ken are doing there. You know, applaud in any way we can. We certainly try to help as much as we certainly can for that. But I think the thing that resonates the most with me as I'm hearing this, because I came in very objective on this, is again, is it the right buildings for the right location? I think the comment before about, yes, if it fits certain guidelines for the town in general, shouldn't we also factor in the exact specific location and guidelines, as opposed to just saying if it works here, it should work there, it should work somewhere else? And when we talk about other buildings in the middle of town that are corrugated, et cetera, that might work when the other buildings around it are corrugated, but it's a little bit different here. I think it's a nice look. I think it's beautiful. If I was somebody to say I'd want to move to town and have a one-bedroom or two-bedroom apartment, I'd probably want to look at this building and say, like, I'd love to live here. So my only question, as living across the street, running a hospitality business across the street, which would actually probably benefit us, right? It'd be that 30 more families that might have guests and relatives and things like that that might support our business. Love that idea. My only question, and again, comment to the teams here and everybody else, is this the right location for something of this size for what it is? And the only last thing I'd add is, we moved here from bordering a very little town in Ridgefield, Connecticut, it was called, where we were 2 years ago. It was a beautiful, quaint, typical New England town. We were there 17 years. What it changed from one point to, say, 5 years in, then 12 years in, was it started with a really, really beautiful little buildings here and there. What happened was that set precedence for a lot more of those coming in. Then the town boards would say, well, we did this for this, we can't not do it for those guys. Traffic patterns, everything like that changed. So we absolutely need housing, we need more people. I'm just wondering, again, is this the right location for a building like this? And are we factoring on all the traffic and things like that that might come out of it? But again, it's weird because I agree with, all the pros and cons of this stuff. It's a tricky one. Thank you.
Yeah, Andrew Arsenal. I guess we're announcing years. I guess it's 64 now I've lived in town. So, and born here, I guess. Well, I guess it was Brunswick. But I'm in support of this project, and I understand some of the cons, the height and stuff, but I'm not scared of that. I think it's a good-looking building. In 90, before 1990, I got elected. 1990, I got elected to town council. Before that, a couple of us helped defeat the fire station referendum. And when I got on, it passed again. So I was for preserving the existing fire station, which was the antique trolley barn, which was as big, if maybe not bigger than this, because it held the trolley cars that came up from Yarmouth and went through to Brunswick. I know it's a little lower to the road, but the fire station we built, we fought over the hose tower when we built it and some other things. But I don't think this will be that bad. I remember being on the board with Elaine Polakowicz, which started Maggie Sunoco when I was a kid. And I just remember her telling us every morning she'd come to meeting and she says, well, we have to make a decision today. And most of them couldn't. And finally she said, if the building is pink, in 3 weeks we'll be used to it. You have to make a decision and move on. And the building itself will blend in time, things will work, and we have to be brave enough to take a step forward. I think if we don't, and this will not happen. Something will never happen here if we don't do this, I don't think. I hear people say, it's really not our lot. That's the problem. It's not our lot to deal with. It's not the town's lot to sell or decide what happens. It's a private owner who owns this piece of land. He's made a deal with a developer of some sort, and that's really what the reality is. It's not the town's in general to make a decision on as far as what happens there. It is in a way, but we can't say we want to park there because maybe Mr. Mosier, whoever owns it, doesn't want to park there. Obviously, he wants to sell it. It's been for sale for years. Nobody's stepped up to buy it. So I think we have a very good opportunity here to bring some housing to downtown Freeport. I'm in favor. I hope it moves along. I understand the refinements. I understand the trees and stuff like that. So, but I think we need to move forward. Thank you.
Any other comments from folks in the room?
I had a question.
Please go to the microphone.
Yes.
Thanks.
Still Judith Burwell. What's the rental market? What's the range of rent that would be charged in this building?
I don't think that's anything we know.
It's not a standard you guys.
It's not a standard that we can consider as a board. If it's a question for the applicant, I think the answer is probably going to be market value. That's what we've been hearing.
I am asking the applicants.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll let them
Sorry,
respond.
I was looking at you, but
No, it's okay. We'll let them answer questions at the end of all public comment. Thanks. Any other comments from this room? If not, I'll turn it to the folks online.
Ready? Okay. John, John Lowe online, we're gonna bring you over so you can share your thoughts.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. I have a couple of questions. I live at 17 Ledgewood Lane in North Freeport on the other side of the highway, but I have lived here, I'm 77, I guess probably 65 years anyway, just about. Anyway, a couple of questions I have is, one is for the ADA compatible apartments on the first floor. Did I understand that there's only going to be one per 7 units, or will there be more that'll be ADA completely compatible? I understand you can get into the building, but what you can do once you're in the building varies, and I would like to see if it's possible to have more of the units fully, ADA compatible for people. And my second question is, and I sent an email about this, is I'm concerned about the easement of the driving out from the place. I understand that they're only asking to go down Depot Street, but if they only get the easement to go that short easement, which brings you on the town property, that doesn't keep anyone from going through the parking lot out on the West Street. So I'm concerned that, I don't know if it's their issue or not, and if they're going to be able to go out through there, you might as well just have the entrance on West Street two-way, because people aren't going to go down Depot Street. They're going to go out through the parking lot on the West Street and turn there. That's the way it's going to be, and I don't know whose job that is to do. And those are my two questions or concerns. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Any other online comments or questions? Hands up.
There's no other hands up online.
Oh, okay. We've got one more public comment in the room.
Thank you. I'm Mary Davis. I've also lived in Freeport since 1987, and I actually live in the downtown area and have been pretty instrumental in the downtown visioning. I, like many of you, are very excited to have housing downtown for both the vitality of our businesses. It's what we all said from the downtown visioning. We had over 750 responses from people who said, please put housing downtown and make it happen. And I think as I'm working with this particular developer on this particular lot, I'm excited to see the type of responsiveness they've had to us in Freeport, the type of change they've made for us in Freeport. And I have to say, when I look back at these old buildings, I am sure at the time the change that came about from building these buildings probably made folks go, oh my gosh, that might be kind of big. But guess what? There were also hundreds and hundreds of people living in the downtown area at that point. So I know it's change, and I know it's hard for us. I think housing is the right thing for us. I would love people to come into downtown, and the first thing they saw is, wow, people live here. So I completely understand folks' thoughts on it, but I think this is the right spot, the right building, and the right builder to make this happen. We don't have hundreds of builders knocking on our doors, and if we turn people down, I think it will be difficult. So anyway, support you. Go for it. Thank you.
Thanks. If there aren't any other comments or questions from the public, I'll turn it back over to the applicant to respond to some of those questions that were raised.
Thank you. I kept a list. I know one of the board members mentioned the vision plan not having flat roofs. There actually were many flat roofs that were the principal group drew for the vision plan. So there were certainly some pitched roofs, but there were several flat roofs drawn. There was a comment about the town square in the rear of our lot. The town square on the vision plan is on the firehouse lot on the West Street and Main Street. So I think it would be compatible, the town square as drawn by the principal group, would be compatible with our pocket park and our lot. I don't think we would negatively impact the town square there. As far as the parking being tight, it's really not. It's in accordance with the town regulations, and it'll work. It'll work. The courtyard not being airy and being squeezed, I don't think so. We built very different buildings, but a similar courtyard in Yarmouth just recently, and it's beautiful. We have benches in it. We have beautiful plantings. It's, I don't know, 25 feet wide. We have residents sitting out. We have residents interacting with the other residents, and it's very successful. So I think the courtyard will be very successful here. As far as the lot being green space and not being sold, I think the town had opportunities for many, many years to buy it and didn't. And it is privately owned, and we do have a contract to purchase it. Range of rent. Right now, it's designed to be a market rate apartment building. We are keeping as much as possible our costs within certain reasonable terms, so it won't be luxury apartments. They won't necessarily compete with the nicest apartments in Portland, but they're not designed right now for affordable units. They're not subsidized units by Main State Housing. As far as ADA units, we will comply with the requirements, and we'll be able to modify units for tenants if necessary. What we've found is that, and talking with other developers, is that complying with the ADA requirements to have fully accessible, meaning the dropped cabinets and kitchen appliances, they don't often get used and don't get filled by those in need, which is a shame, but true. From my talking with other developers, we have a fully ADA unit in Yarmouth. It is being utilized by someone, which was very exciting. I told him not to lease it to anyone else, so we held it out, and we did find an ADA applicant that needed it. It was great. And the other ground floor units are accessible, and if we have blocking in the walls, if people need hand rails to grab onto, grab bars, we can add those. But we'll comply with the ADA mandates for fully accessible. And then as far as exiting on West Street, we will have a signage. And will people be able to break the law? Sure, but we'll have signage. Our tenants won't be doing it. I imagine people from Town Hall who use Town Hall won't be doing it, so I don't see that as a significant issue. I think those were all the questions that I wrote down.
Thanks. Good. We can continue asking questions as the board. We should probably first close the public hearing. Is there a motion to do so?
So moved.
Okay, thank you, Linda. Is there a second?
A second.
Okay, we have to do a roll call vote. Berger?
Yes.
Blanchard, yes. Monteleone?
Yes.
Reike?
Yes.
Hamlin?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. The public hearing is closed. Are there any other questions or comments from the board for the applicants?
I have one quickie. It's just one thing that I think is better than some of the other design comments, and I do not do design, okay? I mean, this is just not where I come from. I don't know, and I am really a layperson when it comes to that. What I wanted to say is the fact that the roof is flat, to me, has a benefit, and I'm willing to say that is a benefit over outweighing some of the other things, because it allows them, as I explained, to put the heat pumps and things up there rather than fitting them along the backs and sides of the building, which I think would be much more of an eyesore, and that would not have fit with a building where you can see from all the sides. I think having a flat roof has its benefits. That's it.
Comments, questions?
I just add the comment. I'm really sympathetic to some of the comments we got about the appreciation of the availability of this space for kind of farmers markets and green space that it's been for several years. And I think there was the comment that was made that was true, that town has had the opportunity to negotiate and purchase this property. That hasn't happened, and now it's private property. And if we were to essentially handcuff its use to be limited to what it had consented to, that doesn't exactly encourage future building lot owners to acquiesce to kind of temporary public uses. And so I think it's reasonable to allow a private developer to maximize a lot in, so long as it's consistent with our ordinances. I think, whether we meet that subjective standard, I think is something that obviously we're going to consider on the next go around. But at least as to the minimum, the standard that's necessary, that bind us on acting on the preliminary plan approval, I think that it meets those standards. Maybe I only, the one additional request, we talked about the additional elevation kind of views that would be really helpful. I think I would also request or move to add the request for an arborist report as to that big tree. I mean, that giant oak tree really is something, and seeing some professional input as to the viability and what steps might be possible to preserve it, if possible, I think would help me feel comfortable with the fact that that's going to come down.
Caroline, sorry, go ahead, Ford.
I just want to, just for the benefit of the overall discussion, just reiterate something Caroline touched upon. We've got an existing ordinance structure, and we have this great forward-thinking downtown vision and the sample buildings, conceptual buildings that went along with that planning. We don't have an ordinance structure now that is consistent with the downtown vision, and that this is a transitional thing. People have got to, we've got to get the different boards in town online. If the vision is what we want, we've got to get ordinances that permit that.
I agree. What was I going to ask you, Caroline?
The tree.
The tree. As far as asking an arborist, can we put that as a condition here? What's your suggestion?
Have you already had an arborist weigh in on the tree, or just your team? I mean, we don't have a standard. We don't have a standard that requires them to save any trees. They have to show a landscaping plan meets the standards of landscaping.
I mean, I would say that this is, it's the equivalent of requesting a study. And it relates to an issue that I think is squarely relevant to, frankly, the design review. Because actually, when we evaluate the scale, kind of the visual presence of this building, whether or not you've got that giant oak tree that's breaking it up versus these, some of what is inherently a new planting, really makes a difference in the way that that'll be observed as large or small on the landscape. So there's not a provision in the ordinance that prohibits it, then I would encourage that we collectively request that to get a little bit more input before going forward on that particular aspect of the site plan.
Doesn't site plan have
Yeah,
something?
I think you can,
Yeah.
that's what I'm pulling up right now. I think
About,
you can request it.
What is the language? Something about like surrounding environment or something like that, right?
Oh, that's not what I thought you were asking, gonna ask,
Oh.
but yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
So you have the ability, based upon information submitted by the applicant under site plan review, to have review by an expert, which would be like them putting their stuff together and then we'd contract with a third party to review it on our behalf. But you'd have to tie it to what standard you're wanting them to look at it. So you do have under site plan review, the standard for landscaping. Let me see. You could look at this, you have two standards, I think. Special features, exposed storage areas, exposed machinery, installations, service truck areas, loading truck, utility buildings and structures, similar accessory areas and structures shall be subject to setbacks, screen plantings, or other screening methods. But I don't think, they're not showing that they can't retain it, so they're not showing that it's gonna screen, so it probably wouldn't fall under that. You do have a landscaping shall be designed and installed to define, soften, or screen the appearance of off-street parking areas from the abutting public right-of-way and abutting properties to enhance the physical design of buildings in sight and to minimize the encroachment of the proposed use on neighboring land uses. Particular use shall be paid to the use of plantings to break up parking, landscaping. The landscape shall be preserved in its natural state insofar as practical by minimizing tree and soil removal, retaining existing vegetation where desirable, and keeping any grade changes in character with the general appearance of neighboring areas. When we continue.
That's your standard.
There's more. Yeah, so you could have someone, if they want to submit on the tree, I could have a arborist, a landscape architect, do a peer review as it relates to that standard, if, which I think you could tie into whether or not it could be preserved.
Maybe to the extent we can, I'd even turn it back to the developer. Is this a reasonable or possible request to kind of get a little bit more input on the viability of the tree?
Yes, so it's certainly a reasonable request. We can certainly do that. I can tell you right now that, so to kind of further that discussion, and if we feel really strongly about that, we can get on that path. But, so I've dealt with a lot of tree people in my life, and the way it's put to me is that trees are like people. The older they are, the more susceptible they are. So, for instance, if you go and clear a lot and the root system is very sensitive, you change the drainage patterns, you change, the nutrient pattern and things like that, you're going to have an issue with an older tree versus a younger tree. A younger tree has a lot better chance of doing that, of maintaining and working through that transition and going from there. I can tell you with relative confidence that what we're talking about with the setbacks that we've determined with the buildings and the placement and everything else, that it's going to be, even if we have an expert come back and tell us that, yes, the tree has a chance of staying alive, I can tell you that with relative confidence that that's probably not going to happen. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to be very upfront, very honest about that whole situation on that. So, but that being said, if we feel really strongly and we want to get an expert opinion on that, we can certainly do that.
Well,
You can also tie it to preservation of landscape, but that has similar standard as the landscaping. Eric, can I ask a question to clarify the tree? The way it's drawn, it's hard to tell actually where the trunk is. It looks like it could be right on the line. Can you confirm that that base of that tree is on private property, the existing tree?
It's,
It's on the,
so it's located on the property.
Okay, over and up. Okay, just want to make sure.
Yeah, if we're talking about a lime tree,
Let's just
essentially,
make sure.
it's,
Thank
it's
you.
within our property.
one thing I would add to this discussion, based on, at least on your drawing, the boundary and topography survey where it shows the 48-inch oak, it seems that it is, and I think we all saw this, it almost adjacent or within the wall, the stone wall that's over there. And I think if nothing else, an arborist, someone really specializing in this, would at least be able to discuss the life of the tree and also in reference to the wall, and maybe there would be an explanation of the tree would be better served if that wall was not touched or there was no excavation over there. It may give a better overall understanding of how to deal with that area, rather than just say it's not going to live or it is going to live. At least there may be something that would help the process of keeping it, if that's at all possible.
So that's fine. The wall and the elevations on the side with the new building are not intended to remain. Just so we're clear, the wall doesn't extend down beyond the pocket park.
Okay.
One thing on the tree, we're gonna have to limb that tree. If we saved the tree, we would have to limit significantly on the building side because it would be too close to the building, the limbs on that side of the building. So we'd have to limit quite a bit, further hurting it. So even if we saved it, we're gonna hurt it more by limiting it. In addition to the root damage we're going to be doing and changing of the entire environment for the tree. And we talked about that tree a lot, and there was some suggestions that we show it, and then we tell you that we can't save it later, and I didn't want to do that. We don't think we're going to be able to save it. We're going to have to limit for sure, and we don't think it's healthy for the building to have that tree there. We think it's going to shade the building quite a bit, and it's also going to produce a tremendous amount of product, leaf product on the roof. So it's not really healthy for the building. Having said all that, if you want us to get an arborist to give an opinion, we can hire an arborist and spend the money and see what they have to say. And I'm not sure what I would do if he says, yeah, it'll live for 10 years. I don't want to tear it down after the building's built. It's going to be super more expensive to tear it down when the building's there than to cut it now. So those are our thought processes.
I think, just add the comment, based on the comments that are coming from many as to the current concerns about scale, having a giant tree in front of it will go a long way to alleviate the concerns that you're hearing about scale. The photos that were shown, that were submitted in the plan that showed the illustration of the elevation, notably include that giant tree, it appears.
So if that's the wish of the board, then we're certainly happy to hire an expert. We'll work with Tony on that. We'll get a report on the age of the tree. We'll talk about the elevations, the nutrient patterns, and then come back to you with that information if that's acceptable.
Certainly.
Will that work?
Absolutely. I mean, and I think that also to any extent possible, I mean, I'm interested in understanding how we're talking about how it would affect the construction, like the development part, that being the hazardous part, whether or not there are feasible alternatives to avoid those risks at that point in time.
Yeah, so, and they do this on colleges all the time, where they have these pretty significant trees. Obviously, the buildings aren't built, within essentially the canopy. But contractors are moving around those. They have lifts, they have other heavy equipment. So you see the boards that are kind of strapped onto the tree and then fencing that you have around that. And so if we were to determine, we could certainly determine that it was viable, then we could certainly take those appropriate measures and be able to deal with that during construction. So I don't think that's an issue on that. But I think, we're happy to, to go through and get that and then kind of map it out a little bit more and then have that discussion.
So,
okay.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem. Good. Thanks.
Just the last thing I just wanted to add to this point, and then we can move on, is just that we are planning, I 100% agree with you that the scale of the tree helps with the building and the sense of place and street front, and that's why we are proposing 4 new trees to replace the 1 tree, and these will be trees that will be placed more appropriately on the site so they can grow mature for a long time to come, presuming that any future building will be built no closer to West Street than what we're proposing. So those 4 trees will mature and be healthy for a century, So I think that, yes, I think it's the long-term view that we will generate a lovely street wall, landscape West Street with 4 new trees along that side that are reflective of that beautiful oak that just, unfortunately, because where it was planted 100 years ago was too far in private property. But now we're building 4 new trees that are more appropriate for it to coexist with a building.
What are the heights of the trees when they go in?
Do you know what the species are and what?
Yeah. Generally, as proposed, they're 2 to 2.5 inch caliper trees. They're generally 20 feet tall when they go in, 20 to 24 feet tall, I would say.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So when you do this, back to your Photoshop project, when you redo that, if you'll, just to reiterate, if you can check the height, you get as accurate as you can on the height. It doesn't feel right to me. I hope I'm wrong.
You're talking about the existing?
Where you Photoshop the building into Main Street looking north.
So we're within about a foot right now.
Good. Of accurate?
Yeah.
Great. Pick up the back, the whole length of the building going down West Street with the trees at the size that when they go in. I just want all of us to appreciate what we're going to see there.
Absolutely.
Yes, this is indicating about 20-foot red maple trees, just granted, this is not a one.
We all know they'll grow, but I'm concerned this is going to be a stark surprise to people in town when it goes up. So if you can give us the full view of that building down West Street with the trees when they go in, we can visualize them growing too.
Can I rewind you back to I know we've talked about the tree a lot, but just to be clear, if somebody's going to make a motion, we need to be really clear on what we're asking of the applicant. I think it's just for them to provide information on that existing tree from the arborist about its potential long-term survival given the project and site disturbance, essentially, period. And then you guys are going to look at that as part of your deliberation and thought for meeting the site plan, landscape, and preservation of landscape standard regarding removal of vegetation? You're just asking for an opinion from an arborist, so you can use it as part of that. You're not asking for an opinion from an arborist and a peer review.
Yes, the first thing you said sounds like what we were asking for.
Yeah, and particularly, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if it's being provided voluntarily, then we don't have to impose a condition on it that dictates, exactly what it is.
Yeah, it sounds like they're.
We have a mutual understanding of what it's going to be, and we can factor that into our design review.
Site plan review.
Site plan review.
Okay.
Sorry, I just want to make sure the
thank you.
applicant was very clear and that the record was very clear.
Okay.
Thank you.
If there are no other, questions or comments, Lynn, are you still there with us?
Hold on. Patrick, since you were so good at IT, would you mind flipping that back for me so we can see Lynn?
Did you have any other comments or questions, Lynn?
No, I support the idea of having an expert come in and confirm the viability of the tree.
Okay, thanks.
I have one question about a motion.
Sure.
And I'm sorry, but I'm just a little confused. My concern has to do with the easement and the drive-through, the exit, from West Street going out, and the comment that if they did not get approval, they would want to make it a two-way. I'm concerned that that's an open end, and if we put something into the motion, I'm not sure if that would be applicable to this motion or to the final motion.
Sorry, can I cut you off right there?
Sure.
Yes, I meant to put that here as a condition. They need to work out that easement with the council before they come back. There is that memorandum of understanding existing, but they do want the easement. If for some reason they can't obtain the easement, come to terms with the council over town hall property, they have other options. They have 2 curb cuts there. They could look at doing two-way. They could alter the circulation. So I think with this layout, yes, you do need something to show that they have what they need going forward for that easement. So that should be added. Here's a condition. And again, the applicant has already reached out to the town manager about getting that conversation started.
Thank you.
Okay. If there are no other questions or comments, I will entertain a motion.
A readable motion.
That must be read because we're in hybrid mode.
So I move approval of the preliminary subdivision plan submitted by LWS LLC for the proposed Freeport Village Apartments. Tax assessor map 11, lot 132, for a 30-unit multifamily residential subdivision. Preliminary plan set dated 10/26/22 with the preliminary subdivision plan sheet C100-A dated 4/20/22, revised through 10/25/22, with findings that, based upon the materials submitted by the applicant and the information contained in the record, the layout of the development is consistent with the information presented in the conceptual submission. The applicant has submitted the required information per the Freeport subdivision ordinance for preliminary approval, and the applicant working towards the development of final plans. The following conditions of approval and/or items shall be incorporated into the final submission. 1, the approval of the preliminary plan shall not constitute approval of the final plan or intent to approve the final plan. 2, prior to final approval, the applicant obtain a final sign-off of the plans by the town engineer. 3, the final submission include a detailed cost estimate to cover the cost of all site work, including but not limited to the cost of drainage, road, parking area construction, landscape buffers, stormwater management, erosion control, etc. 4, the final submission shall incorporate submission requirements of the Freeport subdivision ordinance, including but not limited to Article 8, Appendix C, and Appendix H of the Freeport subdivision ordinance. 5, that final submission shall include documentation of the easement granted from the town of Freeport. And 6, all materials that have been voluntarily offered by the applicant will be provided prior to final submission.
Yeah, before you second, I just want to clarify that it wouldn't be they'd have to go to the council and kind of agree to an easement. It wouldn't be executed since the property's still
Understood.
pending. Okay.
In other words, it would be, my understanding is that it would be
Agreed on.
agreed upon,
Yeah,
although
okay.
not executed.
Perfect. Just wanted to clarify that for everyone.
Thank you. Thanks. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. We will do a roll call vote. Berger?
Yes?
Blanchard, yes. Montleone?
Yes.
Reiki?
I was going to ask if they could make a comment before you voted, but.
Sorry.
We're voting only on preliminary approval for subdivision. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. Yes.
Thank you. Hamlin?
Yes.
Okay, it's unanimous, Sharon. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.
7:30 is
Linda, we lost our money tonight. Good thing we're not betting people. Okay, since we took items out of order, is the applicant here for American Eagle signage?
So you don't have the applicant here for American Eagle signage. Their voicemail box was full. Site, when I just pulled up design review, it actually doesn't look like it says the applicant needs to be present. The applicant's usually present. I think it's up to you guys, and if you have questions, there's nobody here to answer them. So.
Okay. Thanks. I don't have any questions on this particular application. Does any other board member have
No?
questions for the applicant?
No.
Okay, thank you, Lynn. Jim?
I don't have questions, but I do have concern about moving forward on this process that requires board review without the opportunity to have actual, an applicant interested enough to attend.
Sure. I'm happy to table it as well. Either way works for me, so.
Yeah, I think if you want to table it, just table it till someone can be forward to represent.
To be present. Yep, that works. Is there a motion to table?
So moved.
So moved.
Okay, is there a second?
Moved by Lynn, seconded for.
Okay, Lynn will give you the second. How's that work, Sharon? Okay, roll call vote. Berger?
Yes?
Blanchard, yes. Monteleone?
Yes.
Reiki?
Yes.
Hamlin?
Yes.
Thank you. That's unanimous. We have tabled that item. Item number 4 on our agenda tonight is persons wishing to address the board on any non-agenda items. Do we have any things to discuss? No? Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you, Linda. Is there a second?
Second?
Okay, thank you, Lynn. Roll call vote. Berger?
Yes?
Blanchard, yes. Monteleone?
Yes.
Reiki?
Yes.
Hamlin?
Yes.
Okay. We are adjourned.
Good night, Len.
Thank you. Good
Thanks.
night.
Good night. Thank you. I'll see you next month.
Okay.
Come on.
Okay.
See you all.